Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% be part of society? Yes, I have made it on my own in this world. Will not take care of time around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna start the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna start the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna start the old nation with the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
And welcome to Political Unmuted. This is the third episode of the autumn series. And why are we here? Because you can hear voices in politics. We've heard some this week. We've heard some really vicious right-wing voices at the Tory conference, which we're about to be talking about in a moment. And where is the socialist voice? Where are the socialist voices? And everywhere they're crowded out, they're beaten down, so they can't stop us. And what you have here is you have an unapologetically socialist voice coming to you through the internet, so you can know what socialists think about the key issues today. And I'm joined by three fabulous people, not all of them visibly, but sort of the legend that is John Dunn. Thank you so much for joining us again, John. It's so lovely to have you on the show.
It's an honour, and can I say, as part of my thanks for for asking me on. I'm flying the flag for
Hey!
bit of product placement.
That is wonderful, John. God bless you. The second visible person is Neil Terry. Neil Terry, thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much.
You
I'm
are
sure.
massively overworked at the moment.
Yeah, overworked, underpaid. Yeah, but I think it's only right to be fair with John. And there we go. We'll show something the other way around. By the way, everyone that orders my activist calendar, one of those stickers is going on the envelope, so you know it's a good thing that's coming through the post.
I just can't follow those two openers. Well done. That is just brilliant. And our third guest, the invisible
It's
one,
not scripted.
is Jacqueline Hemmings. Hiya, Jacqueline.
Hiya, I'm an invisible woman.
Yes, you are. You're new to the show. Can you tell our listeners something briefly about yourself, where you are, where you come from?
I live in Coventry. I've always lived in Coventry, apart from a brief period when I lived in Birmingham, but the less said about that, the better. I've got 4 children. I've got 5 grandchildren now, and basically that's it. And I like watching this program. I love watching this show. I love what you do.
You are one of our sort of people we love to have on here, because you comment with such perspicuity on the comments, and now you've joined us. And one of the things that this show does is it takes people who are perhaps very used to appearing on radio or television. It gives them the skills of being able to chat away naturally, and people then move on and do great things. It's just lovely to have you on the show, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start. I'm going to come to you, Neil, because you cheat, and sort of I'll come to you last, is what I'm going to say, and sort of let's start with John Dunn. John, your moment of the week.
Well, I think everybody's aware that the Canadian Parliament last week, led by blackface, product of the World Economic Foundation, Trudeau, paid homage and stood and gave a rapturous round of applause for a Nazi war criminal from Ukraine. And I watch a lot of alternate American media, and the Grey Zone followed that up by an expose, which later followed up by George Galloway, about the number of Nazis that were smuggled out of Germany by the Allies at the end of the war. And it was a staggering figure. 10,000 Nazi war criminals were ferried by the UK in something called the Rimini Accord, because it was signed in Rimini, ferried 10,000 Nazi war criminals to North America, and a lot of the ones that went into the US itself worked in their industrial military complex. They took most of the rocket scientists out of Nazi Germany. So a horrific, when we supposedly it was a war against freedom and against fascism, and here we are smuggling them into safe havens.
Yes, that was at the same time, of course, what they were doing was they were absolutely betraying many of the Poles who'd fought against the sort of who'd fought against Germany during the war. They just let them go to Stalin. Stalin demanded them, and we just handed them over. It was our behaviour at the end of the war was appalling. I'm going to put an idea to you, John, and you can disagree if you want. But one of the issues about the Ukraine is that in the Second World War, there were Ukrainians who fought on the side of the Nazis because they were fighting against communist Russia, and found themselves between the devil and the deep blue sea and chose the Nazi side. Now, do you think that in any way excuses
No.
what they did?
No. I mean, Soviet Russia was supposedly part of the Allied, and many, from what I understand, many of these Nazis were committing atrocities in parts of Soviet, Russian-speaking Ukraine. So no, nothing ever excuses being a Nazi.
Okay. And Jacqueline, moment of your week?
It's a not very political at all. It was basically, I was on my balcony this morning and I saw two foxes running by. I suppose it could be political, because I was thinking, how can they run so fast? But maybe it's centuries of practice from being chased by Tories on horses.
Yeah. I was talking, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was, one of the things I did at Manchester, Neil, was I was present at the launch of a new party. And one of the things that, by sheer accident, I assure you, and sort of suddenly we were told that one of the things that it was a party which is being formed to represent rural England against the Tories, because rural England feels betrayed by the Tory party, and it was going to stand up. It was saying it wanted to run candidates in Tory marginals, rural Tory marginals, to give them a fright, to show them that they can't abandon the countryside. But the second speaker suddenly started supporting fox hunting. So you need to be wary that sometimes sort of the alternative to Toryism is even more awful. But anyway, we left it at that point.
I mean, I'm fully in favour of fox hunting if it's Liam Hunt with Liam Fox with hunting. People like that, I'm fully in favour of it. Just leave the little critters in the woods alone. You know what I mean?
Well, it's the cruelty that accompanies that, and
I'm trying to keep the show a little bit light. That's all.
Thank you so much, Neil. Your first moment of the week.
How do you know I have more than one? Yeah, first one's quite. It's been a little bit reported in mainstream media, but not a lot. Is that you see, because I've been heavily involved with the resistance to the Tory party over the last few days, so I've not seen a lot of news. One thing I have seen is that Rishi Sunak has refused to give his WhatsApp messages over to the COVID inquiry, despite having a court order for him to do so. So, what makes you wonder what has he got to hide? You know what I mean? It's. But yeah, I think that's going to be one to watch. Is that, and of course the story broke right in the middle of his party conference, where this afternoon I actually photographed some horse mess outside the Tory party conference, because I thought actually it just sums it all up, doesn't it? So yeah.
These things are not a surprise that it broke. These things are designed, and the media have turned against the Tories. We've got some fantastic. I'll come back to you for your second one. I haven't forgotten it. Leanne, her moment of the week is researching Black History Month and finding about many fantastic, powerful women. Jane Strange, her moment of the week, finding that Rosebank has been given the go-ahead, a disaster, and nothing good will come of it, because it'll be done by a Norwegian giant. It'll be sold on the international market, and we'll pay international prices to get our own oil back, to use it. Laura D. Daly says The Nazis Next Door by Eric Luchbauer. And a number of comments. And there was another one. Here we are, Mark Lungley. Moment of the week was watching the Old Oak on the opening day. And sort of, we do know, of course, one of the stars of that show, our own Laura Lee Daly. And I hear that if you send a postcard in, she's signing them and sending autographing them and sending them back. Get all her myriad of fans. Neil, what was the second moment of the week?
Yeah, she's only charging a £5 each as well.
Yes, that's right. She got the price. You'll be able to spot them later.
But can I also, if you look very closely, you can spot Vonnie in it as well. She's in it. So yeah, but so the latest, just for you, Kirsty. Latest, earlier this, what day are we on? We're on Tuesday. We're on. I think back in the last week, there was an incident involving Flying Scotsman, the steam locomotive. Not the train and not the locomotive, the steam locomotive. There's a difference between them. So, right, very, very quickly, I'll explain. I saw the reaction. So the train is a service that goes from Edinburgh to London every day. Sets off about 5 o'clock from Edinburgh and heads back at about, I don't know, 4 o'clock from London. It's called the Flying Scotsman service. There's a electric locomotive by Linear called Flying Scotsman, but there's a steam locomotive called Flying Scotsman, and it's a locomotive. There's the train.
Neil, our listeners are losing the will to live here. Move to the point.
So yeah, basically the locomotive was doing some shunting around and going back onto its train, so the carriage is behind it. And from what I've seen online, it appears that basically either the brakes failed or there was something went wrong, and it basically crashed into the carriages, hospitalising 2 people and injuring 2 others. Thankfully, I think they're okay from what I can gather, but it's quite concerning. But the latest I've heard, it's had a full engineering inspection today, which it would have to have. And I'm not aware if there's any issues or not. I'm not the latest, but quite concerning that something like that would happen, really. But thankfully, incidents like that are incredibly rare. Thankfully, so
thank you very much. It's a testimony to how careful they are that they happen so rarely. Okay, thank you very much for your moments of the week, everybody. Thank you, John, particularly for yours. It was spot on, and we'll move on.
Now it's time for the big story.
And the big story today is the Tory conference. I'm sorry that it's such a horrible topic, but we couldn't really ignore it. Neil has been there. This is I asked him to come onto the show because he's been there covering it. He was there. You were there at the protest on the Sunday as well, Neil. What did you reckon to it?
Yeah, just to clarify, I wasn't at the Tory Party conference. I was at everything that was resisting the Tory Party conference. So I've been with the People's Assembly in Manchester for the last 4 days. I think 4 days, Saturday, Sunday, 4 days now. So yeah, the resistance to it has been brilliant, and I have to give a huge shout out to Manchester People's Assembly for putting on a brilliant programme of events that have lasted the whole way through. From Friday, where they did a funeral march. On Saturday, they had some speeches and an unwelcoming, where they marched from Piccadilly Station with Aslef to the front door of the Tory conference. Sunday was the national demo, which was really good. Thousands and thousands turned up. I don't know exactly how many, but it was more than 15 people. I know that. So somewhere between 15 people and 2 million. It was somewhere in that region. But it was really good. Very positive. Very kind of everyone there in unity against the Tories. A lot of social injustice issues. that I highlighted as well. My personal favourite of the speeches was the guy from the Hassockfield campaign who spoke, who was absolutely brilliant. He stole the show just by how he spoke and about the conditions in Hassockfields and the conditions that he's had to live in himself. And then Monday, yesterday there was oh Christ, what happened? Oh, I'm trying to remember what happened yesterday. Trying to remember what happened yesterday. There was not much happened in St Peter's Square, which is outside where Tory Party conference was, but in the marquee, there was some brilliant speeches, including from Deepak, who talked about various things. There was a Women Will Not Be Silenced meeting that was incredibly good, that had our friend Chantel Lunt on it, where they spoke about various issues affecting women, including policing and all kinds of stuff like that. Which all of this is available on the People's Assembly's Facebook page, by the way, if you want to go and check out any of these meetings, and I urge you to do so. And then last night there was the cabaret, which was really bloody good. That was really good, by Julia Hesmondal, led on that. And then today it's been there was a Deepak protest this morning, the BMA rally outside the Tory Park conference, where I'd estimate about 2,500 BMA members were there, which was brilliant. You
Can I
know,
interrupt you? There
it
was a couple of people on the chat mentioning the coach that was stopped by the police, the Keep Our NHS.
Yeah, I'm going to come on
You've
to
got
that.
something to say about
Yeah,
this, haven't you?
yeah. I'm going to come on to that in a second. So there was the BMA rally, which was very good, 2,500 people, and then when Suella Braverman did a, quite frankly, dreadful, awful speech today. There was a protest outside by Stand Up to Racism to counter that. The only downside from covering all of this is learning of what happened in terms of the coach that was coming up from London with various people on it, including Keep Our NHS Public. They were stopped. I believe that they were followed as well, from what I've gathered, and they were stopped at Knutsford services by the police and very heavy-handed by the police, where the vehicle was searched for a suspicion of, I think, weapons. I think it was, going to commit criminal damage, and all they found was flags. But the most serious bit of that was that they singled out an Asian woman, the only Asian woman on the coach, and they searched her. And what I believe, from what I've been told by reliable sources, is that those intimate search done as well, include whether but of course, I mean, the police know they can do that. They can get away with absolutely anything that they want. Because there's no impunity. Sorry, they're able to act without impunity. Everything they do, because of course Suella Braverman's got the back, as we found out last week with after what happened with the Chris Cabba murderer, well, suspected murderer. So yeah, I mean that's been a massive downside. But and the thing as well, it has to be noted that Greater Manchester Police, even after that, because it was stopped by Greater Manchester Police, put a tweet out, patting themselves on the back, going, "Oh, it went really well. There was no violence or anything like that." The only reason it passed off without any incident is not because of how the police behaved. The police have behaved atrociously on that day throughout the entire demo. They were atrocious. The only reason there was no issues is because we chose not to respond to it. That was the only issue, and yet it's us that deserve the congratulations, not them. And shame on Greater Manchester Police for what they did with that coach. Shame on what they did for that woman. And my God, there needs to be accountability for this. But sadly, I mean, even today in Suella Braverman's speech, she said, you're the thin blue line. You have my full backing in everything that you do. So it's utterly disgraceful, utterly.
Just very briefly, Neil, what thinking of the Tory conference itself, what for you has been the main headlines?
I've not really, other than Sol Bredman's speech, I read about that on my way home. But I don't really did see was Jeremy Hunt saying that he's going to clamp down on benefit claimants and issue sanctions if not doing enough look for work, which is already in place. So they're announcing some things as a policy that they're already doing. So, but of course, what they're also looking to do that hasn't been widely reported is they are actually going after disabled people as well, where they're bringing them in under the same rules as universal credit claimants looking for work, and basically they're making them the absolute targets. But of course, I mean, after all the money that the government's had to write off in debt, of course they've got to COVID loans and stuff like that, and all the dodgy loans they've given to the grants they've given to their mates and stuff. They have to get it back somewhere. So why not go and take it from the people who are the poorest in society? I mean, you could take it from, like, I don't know, the energy companies who are raking it in at the moment, but no, nah, they haven't got it to give. Take it from Betty down the road who hasn't got anything. I mean, then we'll wonder why she's struggling in a few months' time. I mean, I
Thank you.
swear, to God, if I could afford to move to another country, I'd quite happily leave at this point.
It's the prospect is horrific. Thanks so much, Neil. Thank you for everything you've been doing there at that conference. It's been tremendous. John, can anything good come out of a Tory conference? I mean, what have been the main messages for you?
Well, the nearest anything came good out of a Tory conference was when the IRA bombed it that year, I think. So, sorry to put it off on a sour note, but I believe that, it's very low turnout. They're in disarray. They're falling apart. The ruling class are preparing. They made Labour safe, so everybody is promoting her Starmer and Fiora. And the Tories are going to sink into oblivion for 5 years and then come back as an even more right-wing government. So no, nothing. My idea of a good Tory is Margaret Thatcher, as she is now, not as she was then.
I mean, you mentioned some of the things that have been happening to the Tories, and it's true. What do you reckon to the comeback of Liz Truss? Sort of much more popular her speech than Jeremy Hunt's. What do you reckon? I mean, do you reckon that we're seeing the Tory party preparing to move on from Rishi Sunak?
I think they are. I think it was only ever a stopgap, but it shows they're in disarray. There's for a decade there's been a clash between the new Tories, the hedge fund, get rich quick speculators, and the old type Tories. The industrial Tories as they once were, and it's no wonder that. Liz Truss is popular. She made a hell of a lot of them even richer, didn't she? When she gave them lavish handouts and things like that. And this, if you remember, something similar was happening towards the end of John Major's government. They were falling apart at that time. It was over the EU and things like this. And when people and animals in particular are cornered, they turn in on each other, and that's what this crowd are doing. It's just a pity that there isn't an alternative to them.
I mean, their answer, they have no answer. The only answer after wrecking the country for 13 years is more of the same. We'll double down. Jacqueline, my grandson went with me on the march, and his comment was that, if anything, it was counterproductive. He felt that it would alienate the general public, and he was certainly correct that the people inside the hall would pay no attention to the things that were being said by the marchers outside. I mean, how can we socialists influence the government to begin to bring in some of the things that we want to see? I mean, how can we influence the Tory party at all? The Tory conference? What should we be doing?
Well, protest is definitely one way of doing it, because if there hadn't been a protest, that would have been even worse. So yeah, and I'm sure that every media has reported that a protest has caused a public nuisance or whatever. So what we can do, what do we think? Well, I mean, look at the Chartists and the suffragettes and everything. I mean, people were against them. The government at the time were against them, but they managed to change people's mind at the end of the day, sooner or later.
Are you saying that that the left-wing opposition needs to move to more direct action? I mean, the suffragettes ended up planting bombs and burning down houses.
Maybe not going that far. Maybe not going that far, but maybe more community action. Maybe more mutual aid, more online campaigns, more demonstrations. But maybe more peaceful public acts of disobedience.
There were a lot of banners at the protest saying "defy." The particularly the law as regards striking, the laws against protest, defy those laws. I mean, would you support that kind of thing?
Well. Yeah, definitely. General strike would be, general strike. Anything that would well, it's not about just influencing the government. It's about influencing the people that vote for the government. No, making them see that there's an alternative to what the government is offering, and putting pressure on the government.
How might we get that message out? So speaking positively, how might we get the alternative messages out? How would you go about that, Jacqueline?
Well, with social media, we've got more of an opportunity than we've ever had in the past, because we can go on different platforms, start up new channels. You're putting the message across. Socialist Think Tank is putting the message across, and there's hundreds of new channels that are popping up that do have a socialist outlook. I mean, I've found loads of them going through YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, in Northern Ireland, the Catholics in Northern Ireland, they spent an awful lot of time educating the younger people, teaching them about nationalism, teaching them about the methods of opposing, entirely legally, actually, the government of the time, the time of retrenchment and building, and places, things like Socialist Think Tank, allow that to happen. Thank you very much indeed.
Civics lessons in schools?
Sorry?
Do they do civics lessons in schools, teaching about stuff like this, about teaching about political systems and how to protest and how to debate?
We used to. I don't know whether that stops now. They do.
That might be an idea.
It's sort of interesting to find out. Can somebody who's a teacher,
believe it or not, the establishment isn't going to teach you how to defy them and stand up to them, are they?
No, they're not. But
the one thing I'll say is that one thing I'll say is that if protest didn't work, they wouldn't be going out the way to try to ban it, would they?
Well, perhaps you could call it how to debate a socialist or something, or a communist or something. That might get them to teach it.
Just let me interrupt you all, please, for 2 seconds. If we have any teachers out there, can you go onto the comments and tell us this, because when I was a teacher, they definitely used to do lessons on sort of political structures and things like that. Of course, you're not allowed to proselytize, but sort of what is there civics teaching going on in the classrooms? Sorry, Neil, what were you saying there?
Yeah, I mean, traditionally it's trade unions that teach people about working class background and the need to stand up and fight. But you know, there's been a huge reduction overall since the 80s with trade union membership, which is why a lot of unions are now moving more into doing community work and community recruitment in order to get people to join the union that way, make them see it's part of a bigger thing. And also, I mean, talking of this, we have to give a huge shout out to Bifawu and the work that they're doing to reach out to fast food workers and people like that, you know, who you would never have thought of being in union fighting back. People like Amazon workers at Coventry who went out on strike, and they actually managed to shut the warehouse down on one day, and they got paid for that day they were out on strike as well. It's considered such a threat. But of course, there's no report of that in the mainstream media. So,
yeah, John. I mean, talking about the unions there, sort of the unions also taught people how to behave in political meetings, how to follow the rules of meetings, and almost trained them to be on councils, didn't they? The union meeting.
Yeah. My union in particular had a fantastic education scheme, as well as we used to have week schools, weekend schools at Wortley Hall, near a beautiful place near Sheffield. But we also teamed up with Sheffield University, their extramural department, and we had a 3-year day release course for which we got paid jointly by the union and the coal board. And yeah, it were an education, and you're educated at the workplace. You're educated, like you say, in union meetings, what went, what didn't go, and things like that. And what happened, especially under New Labour, is a lot of unions gave up their own individual learning programs and tied in with something called Union Learn that was promoted partly by the government, and that was very, very sterile and very, very much constricted. And you know, we've got a campaign again for trade union education. A lot of today's younger political activists know nothing about political history, know nothing about the Chartists, know nothing about the diggers and things like that, the Tolpuddle martyrs, the Pentridge marchers. It's not taught anymore, and we've got to get back because we can learn from that. And as Jacqueline said earlier, you know, if people hadn't have protested and that, then we won't be where we are now. We've just got to start doing it a little bit more efficiently and better.
Thank you.
And of course, the best trade union education is the Durham Gala.
I mean, one of the things I will say before we move on is that when you go on these protests, it's the speeches. That's where people find out stuff. That's where they learn. Let's move on. Laura, by the way, has put up some good stuff about the problems of teaching politics in schools, and they do civics, citizenship, but with strict limits to what they can say. Let's move on. Hopefully you haven't heard before what you're going to hear in the next few moments. We have 20 minutes, people. So that's 10 minutes for the 2 topics. So we're going to have to rustle through. HS2 is our first topic. John, what's all the fuss about HS2? And
well, it's been a fuss about nothing right from the start. I've opposed HS2 right from the beginning. If anybody can tell me how getting people from the north to London 30 minutes quicker, levels up the north. It's all about this London-centric policies, political system we've got. I can't get a bus that turns up to take me to the next town about 4 miles away, Halifax. I go for trains that don't turn up, and when they do, if I want to go east-west, they're overcrowded. Most of them are decrepit. You stood up all the way. That's if they turn up, and they cost a fortune. Now, I think the political class wanted HS2 because, of course, MPs want it because they get into London, where they spend most of the time quicker. The political class amongst mayors and councillors wanted it. But if we want to level up, let's have a proper east-west connection. Let's electrify the Midlands main line. I want to be able to drive on the M62, which is near me, without having to stop in a tailback every few miles. I've said I'd like to be able to catch buses and trains that turn up. I'd like to be able to drive on roads that aren't a health hazard and a danger because they're full of potholes. And if I want to go to London 30 minutes earlier, I'll catch a train or set off 30 minutes earlier. And it's going to scar countryside. There's a place that I love near where I used to live, down near Claycross, near Hardwick Hall. A real beauty spot. And many a time when I'm down there, I'll go and park in. There's a little lane that runs between two beautiful spots of old woodland. And the last time I was there, there's a sign on the gate saying, could the owner of this land identify themselves? It's designated for HS2. Going to plough straight through ancient woodland and beautiful countryside. But quite coincidentally, in Tory seats, in lovely rural areas, it goes underground. Now, we can build a tunnel that links us up with France, but we need to spend what will be well in excess of £100 million to get people who can afford it to London a little bit quicker. Now, I've had the fortune of being in China and have ridden on their real high-speed trains, 250-mile-an-hour jobs, and you can't tell you're moving. This is just trying to resurrect the old intercity trains, and it's a laugh. And I'm disgusted that a lot of northern Labour so-called politicians are arguing for this when we've been starved of real infrastructure investment up here. And it won't help me if I wanted to get to HS2, should it go to Manchester or Leeds. I've still got to get on a bus that probably, or a train that probably doesn't turn up. So let's have some proper levelling up, and if they want to connect north and south, move some of the bloody government buildings and departments into the north, decentralise and move. In fact, build Parliament up here. Build it in Claycross or somewhere where I come from, where they can get in touch with proper people. That would be levelling up.
Thank you, John. Jacqueline, do you agree?
I totally agree with John. I totally agree. I wasn't too sure about HS2, what I thought about it, but I've been looking into it, and it just seems like a really bad idea. And if it did get built, how much would it cost passengers? Would passengers be able to afford the cost of going from Manchester to London? It's going to be really expensive, wouldn't it?
So you agree that the money could have been much better spent?
Oh, definitely. And as John was saying about the ancient woodlands being ruined or potentially ruined, there's also people who had their homes compulsory purchased, which a lot of people didn't know about.
So much, Jacqueline, has been spent. They've bought the land between Birmingham and Manchester. I mean, having spent so much, Isn't that an argument, at least, just to finish what they've started? They've already shut down the Manchester, the Leeds, and beyond branches, but sort of, I mean, they're halfway through. Sort of, should they really just abandon it halfway through?
That I'm not really sure about. I mean, I think it like John said, it was a complete white elephant right from the start. So, but like you said, they've already wasted money. But are they going to, if they carry on with it and no one uses it because they can't afford it, won't that be wasting even more money?
Yes, I mean, I agree. Sort of, you bought the land, turn it into a cycle track.
Yeah. Or give it to the communities.
That's right. Sort of, and put it to some good use. Neil, very briefly, what is the socialist solution? How would a good socialist resolve the problem of HS2?
Yeah, I mean, can I just say first of all that I mean, I'm not. I mean, I'm going to repeat the words of what the Iceland boss said on GMB yesterday, which is that I'm no fan of HS2, but if you're going to start, you may as well bloody finish it. Because the amount of damage, as John was talking about, is absolutely right. We went ballistic last week because somebody cut a tree down in Northumbria, and yet there's been no mention about the damage to the environment that this building project has cost and has caused to the environment. It's an absolute shame, and we are the laughing stock of the world. We can't build a road, but also we must also mention Beeching's cuts in the 1960s,
Yes.
which is never ever talked about in all of this. Where if we, there's plenty of lines around the country that are dormant that could still be put in. For example, from Skipton to Combe, for example, in North Yorkshire, the campaigning to have that line put in, and it's going to cost billions to do. But the thing is there'll be no damage to the environment because the track bed is still there. It's just having to put modern infrastructure in around it and relay the track, etc. But it's still there. But the socialist alternative, you see, when it comes to railways, I really don't know, because the railways have never been, certainly in terms of the engineering side of it and the construction, it's never been any socialist endeavour. We need to remember how railways started in the UK. It started between big businesses wanting to move around their goods from the ports to the mills and the factories and stuff like that. And actually, if you look into the history of the railways, passengers came on the back of that because people wanted to ride it because it was novelty and stuff like that, and they realised that actually they can make a bit of money off it. So it's never been a socialist thing. So in terms of how to build it on a socialist level, in terms of in the UK, I don't know, because we've never had it. But what I would say is, following on from what John was saying, is look what they've done in China, where they built it for the greater good of everyone. Whereas, of course, we're here. I mean, HS1 down in Kent is incredibly expensive and very much underused. People are rather waiting for the slower train because it's much cheaper. There's no point building a railway if you're going to price people off it before it even starts. It's utterly ridiculous. And John hit the nail right on the head, because here in the UK, I mean, I use public transport. That's how I get around to places, and I see it for what it really is. And for example, I got back into Bradford at 11 o'clock last night, and I had to get a taxi. There's no buses at 11 o'clock. Absolutely not. They're all stopped. Can't do it. And yet Bradford, for example, is a city of culture in 2025, and we've got no frigging infrastructure in the city. So good luck to come in some evening events. And we have 12 years of Tory rule. This is what we come down to. We can't even have buses, for God's sake, in an evening. And let's not forget, the people that lose out from it. The bus companies will complain that there's no early morning. There's no one getting on early morning buses and late evening buses. There are. The hospitality workers, the people who are low paid, the people in insecure working who need those buses to get to their jobs. And if the government really want a powerful economy, which is what we keep talking about, you have to have the infrastructure. People have to be able to move around. And yet the thing what they're bothered about, 20 mile an hour. stopping people council bring it down to 20 mile an hour. It's ridiculous. It's laughable. And he talks. Rishi Sunak talks about, well, I'm governing for the long term. Well, what you mean like a fascist does? Where they don't want any elections. Is that what you mean? I mean, you've been in power for 13 years. It's all crumbled around you. But of course, Rishi Sunak doesn't see it because he travels everywhere by helicopter. So of course, for him, he thinks it's absolutely wonderful. I wonder if in his mind, if he thinks that everyone else travels like this as well. It's just they don't travel when he travels. That's why he doesn't see so many helicopters. I don't know. But I don't.
Yeah. Thank God bless.
I don't know what the socialist alternative is for this because I've never looked into it from a socialist point of view.
The sort of it's the China thing you told us. It's a railway system built for the good of the public, not for the good of the investor. When you were talking about the start of the railways, they invented the stock exchange to finance the railways. That's why we have stocks and shares. Jacqueline Hemmings pointed out
nothing to do with Stockton and Darlington, though. Stockton. Oh, never mind. I'm going on.
I'll have that right with you later. Jacqueline Hemmings sort of pointed out that yes, the Northeast is completely missed out of any of this. And Mark Lungley says we've already got 2 routes from Birmingham to London. Why do we need a third? No, what we need is east-west routes, not north-south routes. It's just crazy. It's all for the money men, and it needs to stop.
Can I just say, John, on that, the Lucas Aerospace workers who shop stewards in the 70s who wanted to build something other than bombs,
they did
designed a road rail bus that would run both on rail and on the closed railway tracks that Neil mentioned. Beeching actually closed 6,000 miles of railway. And like Neil says, that's still there. We could have things running on that.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Our last question, people, is dealing with the very tragic, the sad death of Eliana Randam, the schoolgirl who was stabbed in her school uniform, waiting for the bus to go to school. And just before we start, your heart breaks for that child and for her family. And we're going to be discussing the issues surrounding that. But I don't think, hopefully that will not detract from the personal tragedy that this is. Jacqueline, tell us about what's happened and why is it happening? What can you explain why this has been happening?
Well, Eliane was travelling to school in the morning with her friend. It was just a normal day. I'm not sure if she was getting on the bus, waiting for the bus, or getting off the bus. But anyway, she was approached. Her and a friend were approached by a boy. He apparently had flowers with him and a love note and whatever. And he tried to approach. I'm not sure if it was Eliana or her friend, but
it was a friend.
It was a friend. Well, they said no, they were trying to get away from him, and he got very angry. He started chasing them. Eliana was trying to protect her friend. He got a knife out and stabbed Eliana in the neck, and then stabbed her somewhere else. And then he ran. I think he ran away, and I think the bus driver and several of the passengers tried to keep Eliana alive, but I think she died. And I think, well, tragically, she died. As to why I think it's done, I think this is intersectional between knife violence and violence against women and girls, and and I looked into several reasons why people carry a knife, and the big one was people are scared. They carry it for protection. They feel unsafe in their areas, so they carry a knife for protection. Those are the people's. I was watching a short video on YouTube. I think it was young I think it was either young. What I don't know if it was young people telling, saying why they were coming live, because it was all these young people were like acting. They were giving voiceovers. You didn't see their faces, so they were saying they were giving. I don't know if it was why they themselves were carrying knives, or why they thought other young people were carrying knives. So they were saying it's self protection, so they could hurt people, so they could look big in front of their mates because it was cool, because everyone else was doing it, things like that. But as to the um, the intersectionality between um, life violence and violence against women and girls. I did watch a UN thing where they said that violence against women and girls is one of the biggest human rights issues on the global scale, not just in the UK but internationally. So it's a really big problem, and it's looking to get a lot worse. Sorry, John, I can't hear you.
Muted, John.
That's my fault. I'm unprofessional. Please forgive me, everybody. I was on mute. Just talk to me very briefly, Jacqueline. What can we do as a society to prevent women and violence against women and girls in this way?
Well, more education in schools. And I don't mean just for the girls, don't mean just telling girls or women, girls how they should behave, but telling boys, teaching boys about healthy relationships, about anger management, about about healthy relationships, more economic resources for communities, more youth clubs. Actually, I mean, I remember when I was young, we had a youth club, but all it had in it was a table tennis. A table tennis. That was it. We could play table tennis all day, but they need youth services where young people, can do the things that they like doing, that they enjoy doing, singing, painting,
Yeah, learning to treat each other properly.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to curtail discussion on this significantly. Neil, you wanted to. There's just 2 minutes each, John and Neil. You wanted to talk about knife crime and young people, Neil.
Yeah, I mean, I accept everything that Jacqueline said. She's spot on. But it is an epidemic, in particular with young people, because they have this illusion that that many of the young people carry. Actually, it's an absolute minority that carry knives, but because they constantly hear that other people are carrying knives, they then carry knives, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But look at what's happened over the past 13 years. We've cut youth services, we've cut youth clubs, we've cut education. I mean, it's a whole structural thing that's needed. Education is only part of it. I mean, I used to work in youth offending team where we used to teach people, well, not me personally, but the team used to teach people about knife crime and the realities of it, and importantly, the realities of dealing with what happens when you actually use that knife as well. And all the government talk about is the solution is longer sentences, longer prison sentences, because that's all the government have got now. They've got nothing else in the toolkit. We need prevention. The prison sentences, once it's happened, someone's life's gone. And let's not forget, it's not just that young person who dies, who loses who's heavily impacted on. It's the families of both families, both the victim and the perpetrator, who are heavily affected the rest of their life. It's a structural thing that's needed to be done. And with only a couple of minutes left, I can't really go into that, but it's structural.
I absolutely appreciate it. I'm sorry. It's I accept responsibility. Finally, John, give us some wisdom about this.
Well, up until recently, I taught jiu-jitsu and self-defense for 22 years. And one of the things we had to learn about was knife crime. Obviously, we taught people how to defend against it. The main sort of defence is to try and get away with it. But Neil's spot on. It's a minority of people that carry knives, and it's for also it's as much to do with the breakdown of society that they do that. The sort of things that Jacqueline talked about: no facilities, loss of community, belonging in gangs, and things like that. But the most remarkable statistic is you are just as likely, if not more likely, to be stabbed in your own home by somebody who knows you. Most knife crime is committed with domestic knives, with kitchen knives and things like that. And that's, we've got to get the police to take things like violence against women seriously. We've seen how they dealt with that in recent years. It's a whole topic that needs investigating, and knee-jerk gut reactions like the government banning certain knives is ridiculous. We've got knives in our kitchen that could slice your ear off, let alone cut your finger, and that could cause serious damage. As a kid, we all carried knives, sheath knives. We played games with them. We didn't go out stabbing with each other because we had places we could play games, things we could throw knives at, etc., etc. And it needs a rational, balanced discussion about this. And politicians need to start listening to people who study it and know about it. And just as a laugh as an aside, as a registered instructor, I was licensed to carry what we called a live sword, a real sword in public without indemnity. I can assure you, I never did, although I was tempted to chop a few heads off in my time. But one we could teach people. I used to teach self-defence in schools and for the Sports Council till John Major abolished that scheme. I went into deprived areas for Sports Council and taught kids who had no other facilities. And we did it in school gyms. He closed it down because we weren't winning enough gold medals, and he put that funding into the likes of Eton and that, so we could produce more world-class rowers and things like that. So, we've got to start restructuring society. You have a decent society, people won't want to go out dominating people either in the form of violence in the home or on the streets with knife crime and other things.
Thank you so much, John.
We also need to tackle poverty. Poverty is a huge issue as well that leads to a lot of crime.
I mean, just picking up on before I close the show on one thing that John was saying, that when you teach martial arts, and boxing as well, one of the key things you do is you teach young people to control themselves. It's not about it's not about the aggression side of it. It's about controlling the aggression, and it's so important. Those clubs were. I absolutely agree with Neil. These things are a function of a society where they've been ripping the money out of it, ripping the facilities out of it for a long time, and sort of we're left picking up the pieces. I'm going to bring the show to an end there. A number of people coming on the chat saying what a good show it's been tonight. It's just been lovely hearing the common sense socialist opinions of these good people about issues facing us today. Thank you so much, John. It's just a delight and an honour so you are a legend, whether or not you accept it.
No. It's my honour being on this show. It's just about the best alternate media that there is.
Kind of you to say so. Neil, you are a hero. And yes, buy Neil's calendar. That's sort of provide him with the food so he can be well enough to come on the show and tell us more about the things he's done. Thank you, Neil, so much. Really in your depth. And Jacqueline, your first time on the show. Congratulations, you were really good. Thank you for your comments, and I do hope you'll come back and join us. And perhaps next time we'll be able to see you as well. We'll get your camera problems sorted out. And to you, the watchers and the listeners, to all the people who've made those fantastic comments, thank you so much for joining in. Get more people to join in. Let's spread this message. Goodbye, Socialist Think Tank, and goodbye. Well, we think it's good.
Keep the red flag flying here.
No, because it's got to stop. Well, thanks everyone. Great show, says Jane Strange. We are treading water at this moment, people.
We're now into politically muted extra time.
Yeah.
So, what do we think about the show this week?
We used to, in the early days, we used to sort of go on and have a little kind of post-show chat where we just chat about this and that and everything. We stopped it because it was going on. Hello, is Paul or Laura there? Are you there? Have you gone away? Right. Well, I don't worry about this. We are live, so people can see us floundering. But for the podcast, with all this will be chopped up. I'm going to say goodbye. I think the answer, John and Neil, is for us to just leave the show. What
do you mean, have a mutiny?
Pardon?
Have a mutiny?
Well, no, it's just that I'm just thinking that if we leave it, there'll just be a blank screen, won't there? Jane Strange, are you okay?
Laura!
Are we on time and a half?
I wonder if we can phone her. Oh, dearie me. Anyway, right. There's nothing to be gained apart from embarrassment carrying on like this. I'm going to say goodbye to you. I'm going to leave.
What do we think about the Labour conference happening next week?
The Labour conference will be the main topic next week.
Yeah. Okay.
Are you there as well, Neil? And it'd be very interesting. Are you actually there at the conference, or are you just like it was at the Tory conference where you're not in it, you're just on it?
No, I have got a media pass for Labour Party conference, but I'm also at World Transformed and no doubt other things happening around as well. But last year when I was at Labour conference, I spent about 10 minutes in there, if that, because there's so much stuff happening that was far better elsewhere. So, and I've got no idea what I'm actually doing next week yet. I haven't even thought about it, to be honest. So, but yeah, I'm heading down there on Friday and staying over for the duration.
Well, book yourself in for some therapy afterwards, Neil.
Yeah. I was sent a few photographer friends of mine. Well, I didn't need to book to go into the Tory Party conference. So I'm going to another Tory Party conference next week.
I was going to try and get to this protest, but then I saw it's a silent protest. Well, what good's that? Make some noise, let the bastards know that we're there. So,
well, there is a big protest on Saturday to save Liverpool Women's Hospital.
Yeah, I know.
Taking place, which I think if people can get down to it, please do. The bigger that is, the better that will be. I'm not aware of any other big protests.
This is I think it's the Starter Conference, a silent protest. Jesus Christ, is that what we've come to? A candlelit vigils and silent protest.
Well, I mean,
that's all you can do in the Labour Party now. You can't say out, you can't speak out. The whole thing's micromanaged to death. The new rules that they brought in you're not allowed to propose motions to conference
No.
if the NPF is talking about it.
Well, to be fair, I
We'll
mean,
find
things that are silent can be very uncomfortable, as people found out on the train this evening.
Yeah, but just stand outside and say nothing when you've got this lot going in and you could be getting stuck into. I mean, I've never, I can't be silent. I'm sorry, so I'd be wasting my energy being there.
I'd be far more in favour if actually for what they did, because it's like when Sir Keir Starmer spoke at Unite's conference earlier on this a couple of months back. I was telling people, well, what I would do if it was me is I'd stand up and turn my back on him, because the thing is not only turning your back on him, but if you're standing up, the camera's at the back, so the press can't see it as well. They can't see him; he's completely blocked out. And it's an entirely peaceful thing to do, but for some reason it wasn't done. But I wasn't at that conference. I don't know. But
There were a good number walked out. There were.
yeah, but but I mean, when I see what Labour are doing, I'm like, my God, it's like it's like what you said earlier on. They're being prepared to just take over from the Tories and literally take over. It's there's nothing to differentiate them. I was speaking to a Labour friend of mine who's still in the party, and I was saying, well, tell me what is it that's different? And she listed like two things that was different, and it was like, well, and they're very insignificant. And I'm like, well, I mean, I've come to the point of calling them Labies, so half Labour, half Tories, Labies. Rhymes with babies, Labies. Is what I'll start calling them, because there's no difference between, and I keep making the joke, and I'm not sure how much of a joke it is. That I think there's going to be a coalition between the Tories and Labour at the next election, because they're the two most closely aligned, aren't they? Let's be honest. Quite depressing, really. But no, but the change will come from below. It will come from us, because I mean, Aslef was speaking at the meeting on Saturday, and he said, "Well, my enemies are my friends. But if Labour get in and do exactly the same, then they will face the same wrath of what the Tories are facing." And I'm kind of like, yeah, but it's not enough personally for me want to vote Labour. It just isn't enough.
We'll talk about this next week. I'm going to something's happened at show headquarters, and I don't know what it is. I'll try and contact them. But I'm going to love you and leave you. John, you were fantastic. Jacqueline, who's listening in still, she was fabulous, wonderful. God bless you. Neil, see you when I see you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for hosting it. Brilliant as ever. Thank you.
Brilliant. Absolutely. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
People.
Thank you.